Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to do an unboxing and offer some general impressions of Nevsky, Teutons versus the Russians in 1240 to 1242. Now this game, designed by Volko Ruhnke, is the first game in GMT's Levy Campaign series. Let's jump in and take a look. All right, I love the color palette of the game. Now this is a big box, 3-inch box, of course, with lots of stuff, and it's a good hefty weight to it. If we take a look at some of the game meter and game scale ratings to kind of help us out here a little bit. Now the complexity is listed as a 5. To be totally honest, I've spent a little bit of time with the rules this weekend, maybe about a half hour to an hour, not as much as I had hoped to. I'm finding it a little bit more complex than that, but that might be because I haven't played a game in the coin series perhaps, and maybe there's some transfer of kind of concepts from that to this. Not quite sure there. I think part of the concepts and the mechanics are slightly new to me, and I'm just not quite seeing, although I understand them, I'm not seeing quite how they mesh together. So I'm finding it a little bit challenging at first. Again, one of the nice things about picking up a game in a series, however, is that once you learn one game of the series, and right now there are 2 games in the Levy and Campaign series out as I make this, with a third on the way and many more in kind of various stages of design. So this looks like this is going to be quite an extensive series as things progress in time. Solitaire suitability is a 7. There is no single player mode. However, the designer has mentioned that the game is very suited for solitaire play if the player plays both sides. Now, it is listed as a 1 to 2 player game, and the campaigns are basically the levy and the campaign. The campaign part of that is 40 days per turn, and the units are 500 to 100 horse or 100 to 200 foot in itself. And it is a point-to-point map, as we shall see. Let's open it up now and take a look at what's inside. Now, I'm very excited about, as I get into these, I have both Nevsky and Almoravid, the second game in the series, because as I'm creating this, it's about a week away from the Levy and Campaign Festival, the online festival that will be next weekend. So that is one of the reasons why I want to get into both of these games before we start. Let's start out with the rule book here. Now, the rule book is 24 pages. And we get to the scenarios about page 20. So you've got about 20 pages of rule, matte paper, very well designed, very clear, very well written. I am finding it, for whatever reason, I'm struggling a little bit to get the flow of the play. So I think what I'm going to do, I've gone through the rules somewhat and kind of skimmed through them. I'm going to set up a kind of a practice game and start that way and then work my way backwards into the rules and see if that accelerates the learning a bit. But very well done, very clear, very excellently written. Great rule book and fitting start to your adventures with Nevsky. The other thing I like about this too is this background book. Now this background book is 48 pages. The reason I like it is because for most people, this period of history, this kind of micro period of history, isn't something that a lot of people know about. So this background book does a great job. First of all, it gives some play hints. It's got hints on strategy. It gives examples of play. So there's a rather kind of extensive example of play. And come to think of, this is probably something I should actually look at and then dig back into the rules. I know there's a lot of videos out as well on how to play. So it's not like you're lacking for resources to learn it. It's just that my way of learning it from starting with the rule book has felt like it's a little bit of a slower way to go right now. So we have a rather extensive practice game, an example of play that goes on. And then we get further into that, and about halfway through this, a little bit longer, we get a campaign synopsis that talks about the history of the campaign. Now, in this game, you have lords, and the lords raise troops, and they go fight against each other, and then you're trying to keep your lords in the field. And here is an extensive history of all the major lords in the battle. There's 6, I think, for each side, for the Teutons and the Rus. Here's the actual timeline, the historical timeline. So you get a chance to really dig into the history of the battle, which helps a lot. Here's more on the lords. And then what also I like here is we get into the back here, the arts of war. There's 4 decks of cards in the game. And some of them are events and some of them are about the lords. But these event cards can play a huge factor in the game, and knowing how to play them well, of course, is a key to knowing how to play the game well. And these pages of the rule of this background book here talk about each one of the cards for both sides, and it gives tips for it and history for it, how it sits within the historical concept, and tips for playing it well. This is, for a game like this, it helps someone to dig into it, so helpful. So just really grateful to see this. I think this is a game that, the more you play, the better you're going to get to be able to play at it. Such great depth to all of the different cards and events and kind of creating different capabilities and tactics and things like that. So there is our background book. I should also mention here, we get selected sources at the end, which helps as well. I want to jump back to the rule book real quickly here too, because it is worth mentioning how many scenarios there are. There are a number of scenarios in it, and they vary in length and complexity. So we get 4, 5, 6 different scenarios. I also want to mention that one of the things the designer has mentioned is that newcomers to the game find it hard to kind of figure out where to start with the levy. So GMT Games, and I think this is probably available on Board Game Geek as well, I've printed this out and added this to my game. This is a quick start scenario where instead of starting with the levy's already taken care of. It's a 1.5 turn short quick start scenario that starts with a campaign that's designed to help people learn how to play. So I've printed it out, and this is where I'm going to start in terms of playing. Now, let's jump in and take a look at the map. The map is 17 by 22, so it's rather small here. I'm going to show some close-ups of the map as we look at it as well. But this, of course, covers the two areas, Teutons and Rus, Teuton here on the west and Russia on the east, the right side. Gorgeous map, beautiful. It's point to point, as you see. We've got waterways and landways. We've got different cities, and a lot of the function of the map is built into the map. I'm going to show some close-ups here because I think it's just it's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's just kind of I love games where the artwork just really helps pull you into the game, and this one does that in so many ways. Now, 17 by 22, you may be realizing, is also relatively small, and especially when you consider that a large part of it here is really the turn markers and some of the game flow and game management element to the board up here on top. So the actual map itself, it's probably 2/3 of this 17 by 22. So, 17 by 15 perhaps is the scope and the size of the map itself that you'll be playing on. However, that's not the footprint of the game. As we shall see, there are Lord's mats that come into play that are going to impact and make the footprint of the game considerably larger. And so we'll take a look at that as we go forward. Now, there are blocks in this game. Most of the counters are management counters, game management counters, and the actual fighting units are wooden blocks. We'll take a look at those as we get further. Some of those blocks, for the lords on them, have stickers that go on the wood cylinders to represent the lords, and they give you spares too, which is really cool. These look wonderful. I'll show a close-up on those. There is an optional rule. The next two things we see here are basically the hidden screens, the player screens. There's an optional rule to play with your lords and their forces hidden from view. So this, very artistically done, a nice touch. We've got two-sided, two of these that are the player screens to help hide from play. I just love the artwork on these. I'll show kind of one of these at scale and then a close-up on these as well. So just really elegant work for this. Then we come into the player aids quite a bit. We have our Art of War, the Teuton deck. So these are, again, kind of references and player aids for the cards themselves. And I believe the other side here is the Russian deck for the Arts of War cards. And over here, these are the Lord references, so more information on the individual lords that are game, the 6 Russian, the Teuton lords. The other side here is more a player aid. This looks like a kind of, not necessarily a family tree, but a hierarchy of the various personalities that are in the game for the Teutons, with Gregory X, the Pope, being at the top there. And we have a similar card here for the Russians. So again, all the information on the lords. Very helpful in terms of having these in references that I'd be able to dig up within the game. So I think that's going to make it a lot easier to dig in and play. Now I have one errata correction, but that's it in the game as I know of so far. There may be a few others. The game's been out for a while. This is the kind of command reference, the player aid reference that has a lot of the various information that you need to be able to conform battle and storm forces, strongholds, and their various information that's on here. On the backside, a very helpful sequence of play. So, and then a second one of those. This one is identical. It's the player aid fold out for that. Now let's jump in and take a look at the counters. Again, most of these, if not all, I think some of these smaller square ones are units that are represented by the various vassal forces. But most of these are player aids. They're two-sided. We have loot markers, coin markers, victory points, provender. We've got a moved marker. This is ravaged for half a victory point, and then some different markers that are used on the map to help keep track of various figures and quantities. You can see both sides here. Color, they're already clipped, so you don't have to clip them. You do not need to clip these counters, except for these square ones, which have a square edge to them. So these half-inch counters here would be something that you'd probably want to adjust. Again, these look more like some fighting units, although I'm not 100% sure on that. These are the movement markers, so sled, provender again, different amounts of it, boat. And on the other side, we have carts, more provender, ships. We've got knights, Asiatic horse, militia, so lots of different things. And I'll show close-ups of these as we go through. All great artwork, really colorful to pull you into the game. More to go. These are the various lord markers and their vassal markers. I'm not quite sure yet which ones are which. I did read that in the rules, but it slipped my mind since then. Again, we have more gameplay markers, siege and walls +1, and various other markers to keep track of how things go. Now we can dig in a little bit and take a look. Here are our wooden counters. There are a lot. And again, the counters represent the military forces. What happens, though, is you have a lord on the map, and then these military counters go on the lord's mats, which we'll take a look at. So basically, the lord and all the forces and his vassals and forces are represented on individual mats, and then you bring those mats together to kind of have a battle that happens off of the map. And there's a good, maybe 100 or 200 of these in here. There's quite an extensive collection of them. Let's start now. Let's go in and take a look at these collections. We have 6 dice, 3 white and 3 black. And we have the lord mats. So this is where all of those troops are going to go. Then you're going to arrange these lords in a battle formation when they fight against each other. So we have 6 here for the Russians, and then 6 for the Teutons. Again, each individually name a historical figure that existed in that time. Different ratings and different strength ratings and components for them. These are single-sided, so you're going to play with these off to the side. And this is what I believe the player mat would sit in front of the hidden screen if you're trying to screen those forces from your opponent. So we have 1 stack there for the Russians, and then 1 stack for the Teutons as well. Similar thing. So again, we're getting pretty much to the end now. We have 4 decks of cards. I've already opened these out to take a look at them, and I confess I'm not far enough into the rules to quite get a sense for how these lord cards play. It looks like these are various figures, the lords themselves. I'm not sure why there's 3 for each, but again, very colorful. Somehow these come back into play, although I haven't quite got that far yet in the rules. All in color. These are for the Teutons, as we can see. And there's an identical deck of cards here for the Russians. Then we have, so these are the command cards. Yep. Then we have the Arts of War, which are your event cards and other cards. And these have a top and bottom to them. So as we're looking at these are the Russian cards. So they have, again, these are the ones that are referenced in that player aid to kind of give tips on how to play them. And there's a top half and a bottom half, and they're used in slightly different ways. Some of these you can hold on to. Here we may play in a non-summer battle, round 1, Russians, walls 1-2 against melee. So again, learning how to play these cards well, probably a big part of learning how to play the game well. And think of these various restrictions and elements to them, so creating a wider range of tactical options by including decks of cards as well. And that basically comes to the end here. We have another identical deck for that, well, not but a different deck for the Teutons, and that brings us to the end of the box. Very elegant system. I'm excited to dig in and play. I'm looking forward to the Levy Campaign Festival this coming weekend, June 4th, I believe it is. And so I have about 5 more days to dig in and learn this a little bit better. And if you're going there, I hope to see you there. If you've enjoyed this unboxing, here is another one on a similar game. This is the Men of Iron series, which is an extensive 3-pack of games that you might be interested in if you do like the Levy Campaign series.